All right, everyone. This is week 3 in our build. We're doing this Craft 5 marketing site build for a client. And as we show them weekly what we're working on, we're also sharing publicly with their permission to kind of show you how we build a marketing site and just go from there. So, I mean, we've already been started. So if you've been following along, we're just going to jump into it. If you haven't, you can go back at the beginning, hear a little bit more about stuff. But Michael, you're the one building this thing out. So what's been happening over the past week? Like, what did you show the client yesterday? Where are you? What's new in the build?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been, as you say, we're like going through and building out different rows of components that we have within like the content builder. And what we're doing is we're showing as we go along. We have weekly meetings with the client, so it's not just like, hey, your site's done. No, they're seeing as we go along. And so we've been going through that and hooking up data at the same time in some cases, or just going through and finishing out the UI of it first and then revisiting it later to connect it to Craft. It all depends on the complexity. The way I kind of look at it is if you have a component that's pretty straightforward, why not just plug in the Craft data while you're building out the UI, so just throw that in there. But other ones that are more complex, and we like to keep our tasks kind of short and sweet or concentrated, small. So if it's going to take longer, then we'll say, okay, let's just build out the UI first, make sure it all works and everything. And then the second task or the follow-up task to that is to hook it up to data. So that's what we've been kind of doing. We're showing the client what we are kind of concentrating on in this case, because we want to get the client into the CMS as soon as possible. And so what we're doing is with the designs that we have, there are some specific rows of content types that are shown on the homepage. So one of the things that we want to do is to have them start playing around in a live preview in Craft to see how things work so they can get a hang of it. And that'll kind of give them a jump also on starting to get content into the site itself. So we're going to set that up so with a user group so they can go in and start editing the content. And that's basically what we're doing. We're building out all the components that are necessary for that. That's pretty much almost all done for the homepage. Again, these rows of content, stuff like that, will be able to go on other pages as well, but we want to get this done first to get them into the content management system and start working on it.
That's awesome. So are we deployed yet? So is that something where are they actually able to add kind of final content into a final environment yet, into a DB, or is that not yet where we are?
What we would like to do with that is next week. So basically, we have a staging server set up, which they can do that. So that would be the way to do. We could set up a production server, with it under a different subdomain or something like that for a while and have them do it that way. But for now, it might be just a case of having them work with this on the staging site to input data, and then we can just use that database when we run a production version.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do you want to just show quickly kind of what the new stuff is on that, and then
sure.
I think why don't we do we can then talk about somewhat behind the scenes work, like internal communications around all this, because essentially right now you're in this build phase where the week after week while you're doing this is essentially the same type of work, just with the new designs and new places in Craft to hook it up. But it's just you're in the building process where it's you take a design component, mark it up, hook it up in data and Craft, and it just slowly starts to become the website, right? So there's not a lot of new details in the build other than the actual designs themselves. But yeah, go ahead and show us that, and then let's talk about internal communication.
Okay, so let's see here. This is sort of the larger, get this here, heading area. So this is all this data is now connected to Craft, all of the navigation. I think in our last episode, we kind of touched on this a bit, how the layout is going. And now we're just like building out these rows of components. In this case, these all run on using the scroll position for CSS animations, just a simple, have videos in the background, they're scaling and changing opacity on them. That's something that they wanted. These images kind of cycle through. This is one that you can see I'm working on. I just need to hook in the images. So we use placeholder images to make sure everything works and the layout works as well. And these are some other options that we set up. These are sort of like previews of projects. They all have different variations on them that they can do. and layouts. This is already all hooked up to Craft as well. You can see we got all the images coming in. With the images, we're using AWS to host the assets, and we're using ImageIX to do the actual transforms, and also provides more modern image formats like WebP and AVIF, yeah.
Yep.
AVIF, yeah. So yeah, this is where we are now. These are all of the components that were necessary in the design for the homepage. So with that done, we should be able to go through and give them the option to start working on some of that data.
So in these, so what we're looking at here, this is actually pulling from Craft, the Craft homepage entry.
Yes, exactly. It's pulling in from, just let's see. So what we're seeing here, this is just pulling in from the entry, the homepage, and yeah, so we're pulling in all of this is all the data that corresponds with what you've been seeing here, the different rows.
Cool. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, we have in our entries, we have all the setup. We tend to use the settings, a single channel for things like settings or global settings sort of thing. That's where it's going to be going anyways with the next versions of Craft, because categories are going to be disappearing and going to be structure sections, and singles are going to globals are just going to be going over to singles anyways. So we've set off all this stuff up here. So this is like the basic content information, social media accounts, maybe some branding stuff here, which is the image that's used in the footer. I'd like to give them as much control over it as possible without overwhelming them at the same time. So we break everything up into tabs. This controls all the navigation, the links that we have in our different navigation, and then projects. This is, as we discussed also, we like to use entry types within a pages structure section, so they can place like a listing or a landing page for projects. In this case, they can place it anywhere they want within the site structure. But we can also give them this option here, which is okay. They can, once that's done, because they might have multiple, you never know. Then we can define a default one. So if they're going to search for a project, it's always going to go to that one. If it's not, then we can set it up so that just code that does it. If it's the template, it'll get directed to. But if they want a specific one to use, then they can define it here. And the same thing with stories and stuff like that. And this is for our additional content rows or reusable content rows that can be dropped in as well for these pages, which is globally.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it's exciting.
Sure.
Yeah. Why don't we back out then and say, so, all right, so the homepage is, you're just chipping away at getting these elements in there. Why don't we do it where, like, how you're breaking up your week. So of how you know what you're doing. So basically just the behind the scenes into our communications internally. There's parts that the client can see, and there's parts that they don't, because it's just internal things as well. Why don't we just walk through all of that and share how we're organizing this project and how you're splitting up your time. You mentioned about small tasks, so like we can talk about that too, and our approach of small tasks and what that looks like for us. So here, let's pop this open.
Sure. Yeah, we are generally live in Basecamp for this sort of stuff. The first, with any project, after we've done sort of the planning, the ideas, we like to break things out into features or feature cards. And within those features, then we place tasks that are for that feature, in order to get it finished. In this case, as you can see, this one was pretty much done. We have everything that's all reviewed on staging. This was more of the build infrastructure work that we had, setting up the repo, all the basic stuff that has to happen before you can start coding, sort of thing. And what we have is like a general global task that describes what this feature is for, what has to happen, and then just kind of, this is the information, more information on it. And from there, then the developer or the person who's taking it on can go in and create tasks themselves. They add the tasks to the feature card, and then they scope. So later on, I'll go into like scoping here. Let me find something that might be.
Well, even to pause real quick, so that global task. So the way Basecamp, so we're basically using Basecamp in a way that makes sense for the way we work, and just kind of having it fit for us, which is, so as you said, we break it down, each of those groups of in Basecamp, our to-do lists, we put them in like that card view. So we call them like feature cards. And then since Basecamp doesn't really have a place of having like this meta information about this whole list, we use that global task up top as this placeholder for just the spec for the whole feature.
Mhm.
This whole set of work is there. And then the important thing that you said too is then you're the one creating the task. So our project managers, like we're not always, sometimes we create those things, but it's the team. So it's you, it's the developers who are then saying, I'm going to create tasks according to my implementation plan.
Mhm.
And you're doing that in that way. And then yeah, so then I just wanted to kind of dive into that just a little bit more on that.
Mhm.
So like even in the tasks that you're creating, like how do you know which tasks to create? I think it gets into our idea of working small as well. Like so
Mhm.
what's your process for breaking down of how do you know which tasks to do and before you get
Mhm. Well, generally within the global test could be if you were the person who created it, you kind of already have it in your head. But normally there's like a feature implementation notes. These can be um, detailed a little bit more, saying, okay, by looking at it, if we're looking at something that's UI sort of focused only, then we can look at it and say, looking at the design, okay, we need to build this row, we need to build this block, we need to build this, and trying to break them down into smaller tasks where you're just concentrating on one thing.
hmm
So that's the kind of way I look at it. If it's a UI, in this case, as you can see, also I'm kind of tagging these with UI and data, so that means this is easy enough to work on the two at the same time. There's other ones that might just be, okay, we just need UI by itself. So how these tasks basically work, like this is the call out row component, is we give it a backstory saying, okay, so because you always, it could be that, I get sick tomorrow, or and I can't work or something, and we have to have another developer come in and work on the task. So you want to have at least some sort of a backstory of what it is. Um, then what things will be possible? The DoD is like definition of done, and we'll kind of write out here. In this case, as a site admin, I can include a call out row component on the page, and as well as set its layout type. Some notes and references. Then I'm just going here and putting in from the design what these are, and then away you go. We also give it we usually have like a little shirt icon in here, but this is part of scoping. So it doesn't matter if it's yourself or if somebody else, especially if somebody else is coming in to work on it. What the developer's first task to do is, before starting to work on a task, is to go in and scope it, right? So this is, we go in and scope and put this little block down in here, which is kind of like some boilerplate stuff to ask, which is, okay, are there any red flags? Red flags for us is like something, hey, wait a second, we're either there's something in the description I don't understand, or there's why do we need this, or there could be anything that the developer looks at it and go, So if it is a red flag, then we'll just go in and the developer will write in what it is and flag the task with a little red flag at the top, so that either the lead developer or the account manager can see it and say, okay, we got to figure this out before this person can work on it. This is the sort of sizing scheme that we have. So we have like a t-shirt size scheme, which is small, medium, large, extra large, right?
yeah
What we're trying to do is always have the task be as small as possible. Oh, we also have excess or extra small. So in this case, S correlates between 1 to 4 hours of work.
hmm
So this, being set up, I estimated, yeah, it's going to be S. It's probably going to be in the 3 hour range or something like that. So that's because we're hooking up the data as well on this one. And so if for example there's an M size task to it, you think, was there something I can break it out to keep it a smaller task, so it isn't one bigger task? If that's the case, then the developer will suggest here, okay, why don't we just split out the UI work from the craft work, or maybe there's some JavaScript feature that needs to be added into it as well, that that's going to take longer time or something like that. So rather than having a larger M size task, we have smaller S
yeah and
size tasks.
our m's are 4 to 8 it's 8 hours or less,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's kind of our M size, and that's our max. Like everyone on our team
Yeah.
knows, you're not supposed to be working on anything larger than an M. If something's size, when you go in, and you're like, oh, this is going to take me 15 hours, then
Mm,
instantly everybody knows. You need to create a new feature card for it. It can't just be an individual task, and that feature card needs to have a global task, and then broken down into even if it's just 2 tasks within it. That's just how we organize it, so we know just visually. Oh, we look at this
mm,
thing. This is bigger, and
mm,
so just by scanning Basecamp, we can kind of get a sense of the volume of work that there
mm,
is as well. But yeah.
mm. Yeah, it also makes it easier for if another developer has to be brought in or something like that, then it's easier to incorporate their work if the tasks are smaller. If you're both working on the same task, that can be confusing sometimes. And so finally, we have here, which is our last question is like, okay, is there anything here that could cause some scope creep, which make it larger than your sort of size estimate that you have? And here it could be anything. I mean, it could be failing Cypress tests. It could be deployment problems. It could be something that is more specifically related to the functionality of the task, or in this case, the component. Yeah, just kind of write it. It could be anything. Sometimes it's completely nah. This I've got this, no problem. But I always tend to like to think about it because I use this more to think about if the task is going to get larger than in this case, I'm just saying, okay, if the layout type switches are too complex for one component, then I'll have to break it out into various components and call them in dynamically. That may make things go a little bit slower than I initially planned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like thinking about like what might get you on this one. What's a gotcha that you're thinking about. Yeah, it's real helpful. What I like about this too is all of this is that orange little thing up the top there says the client can see this to-do list, right? So even your risk things in there, like if they wanted to come in here and watch this, they're not tagged on these things, so they're not getting notified, but they have access to it and they can come in and start to see where it is. They could see all of those scoping tasks. They could see how you're answering all of that stuff. So in this sense, everything is visible to our clients on that side of stuff.
Yeah, and it's also we do call them in if we want them to review something on the staging server.
Yep.
So like in this case, you see some tasks that I have in here that I gotta go through and do some my own QA on, and then do what we call a handoff, which is basically having either the project manager or the client or both have a look at it, and you kind of write out what they need to do to look at it and review it, and yeah, then they just move up the chain. So if it gets approved, once it gets approved, then it's ready for production deploy. And then once it gets deployed to production, then it can be reviewed again on production if it's necessary. Yeah, and you can see the right now these are tasks that I shaped. I just basically created them while I was building out this feature card, this main content components. This is the kind of work I was doing. I was going through and looking at the data. Okay, we need one of this. We need a heading component. We need a rich text block component. We need a quote, table, buttons. We need all these things by looking at the design. So I'll just put these sort of placeholder tasks in here so I don't forget. And then for example, these are ready to start. So these are already kind of fleshed out what needs to happen, so they have all the story, what needs to happen, these ones, but these are still being shaping. So my next step after I get these done and these have moved up the chain, then I can go in and start shaping these out more. Sometimes I'll just put like an image in here so I'm reminded of what it is in this case. But yeah. And as we go up, then things get reviewed, they get approved, and then we close out the feature card and move on to the next feature card.
Yeah. And so that's how because we do go in order. So the green cards here, so you've got that one up in the top right. I forget what that one is again. That's the build infrastructure. Yeah. So that one's essentially done. We know it from there. Your global items are essentially done. So now you've moved into the third card, which is that one. And so we can see how much work is left. You have all those tasks down there. They're not sized yet because they're not shaped yet, so we don't fully know how many things. But knowing that you typically work in small tasks, it's like everything's probably between 2 and 4 hours, average maybe 3 on each of those. You can start adding up how many hours in a week that we're doing, and now that moves forward, and then we can get a sense. Okay, after content components are done, then we get into general pages and home page. We've got projects and stories, features. We've got that open assets thing, and then just some final check-in, and then we're done. So some things move faster than others because some feature cards are smaller than others. I imagine the one you're on now, content components, is probably the largest one, right?
Yeah, it is pretty much. Yeah, it's the biggest one. It's where we have the most tasks. And other ones, they're a bit smaller because they're all kind of using things that we're building in this first feature, in this feature card over in here.
Yeah.
So as you can see, they're smaller ones. Yeah.
Cool. And then internally, we also have communications where that we just communicate where Michael has it's called a POA, So it's a plan of action essentially,
Mhm.
where Michael's assignments are kind of put on there, like, so he knows what projects he's on, what things he's doing, what are the responsibilities essentially for the week in order of priority.
Mhm.
And so this is where then every single week there's a new POA, plan of action, kind of in here. And so our weeks again are Thursday to Wednesday, and so it's really straightforward this week. So Michael sometimes has very busy POAs for bouncing around on some different projects,
Mhm.
but right now you're very focused on this build, and so yeah, so it just has that kind of list down there of
Mhm.
those things. And then there's a whole process for this as well that you're going through. So like,
Mhm.
again, more process of following through. So like, yeah, do you have yours down below? Do you have that? Have you already done your? This today's a Thursday.
Well,
So have you done it? You know, look at last week.
today's Thursday. Let's have a look at last week's one. So I have to. That's one of my tasks today is to go through and scope all of the tasks that we were looking at, the ones before, the ones that weren't fleshed out. At
Yeah,
the same time, I'll go out and flesh those out, the ones I'm going to be working on. And so this is from last week. So I had my lead developer duties, and again, I was mostly on this project. However, one did come up, a bug fix that came up from another client, so we had to get that in there. And so this is what we do. We kind of report in here, first asking, the, is this too much work? Is it too little? Is it just the right amount? So you kind of respond to that here. Yes, it's enough. I said, are there any tasks which you noted like processor blockers, any red flags? As we discussed earlier, if I'm scoping a task and I go, hey, something's not right here, then I can list that out here. Is there anything, for changes? Do you recommend any change to another developer? If there's something you don't know and you don't think you have enough time to learn it, but another developer does, hey, can we have this person work on that part as well for me? And then we just have a schedule, so as we work from Thursday to Thursday, we just kind of write in, okay, this is what my plan is to work on. So the first day was kind of getting all of my lead developer duties out of the way, sort of thing. Some maintenance tasks from updating craft and such. And then I just go through. Okay, Friday I'm going to be working on these. I generally try to keep it around like 3 S size. So that's another nice thing about kind of scoping and getting the sizes of each task. It'll give you a good indicator of how many of those tasks you can get done in a day. So 2 to 3, depending on the type of task, I'll for small tasks, I'll put together in a day. And yeah, so that's the kind of report things go on. And then daily we go through and make sure, okay, there could be something that I messed up on. It's like, no, this is taking a little bit longer than expected. So yeah, or I need to a task was added to my POA or something. In this case, was what happened. So I need to work that into my schedule. So I'll just update the schedule here again, and then our daily. And if there is anything, if there's nothing's changed, yeah, pretty much on the same. Just fill in. Yep, ready to go. And yeah, then we go through. This is also something that we have is what we call a 125 rule. If a project has gone on over, is at 125% of what you initially scoped it as, or the size it has, we just leave a report here and give us a link to, if you're working in a specific pull request or a branch, link to it there so another developer can jump in and look at it for you as well. And just kind of a description why you think it's taking longer, what's going to take to complete it, and how much time. So, and then at the end of the week after and starting the new week, what we do is we go back and do a retro on the POA. So it's kind of like was like a post mortem on a project, or
yeah,
just the week. How did it go for you? What we always ask, celebrate good. What went well? So you just kind of write out, okay, hey, this is what what went good in the project, and ask here, is there something that you learned? Because then all of us developers, we can kind of, since we're all working on the same platform, which is craft and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff that if I figure something out, then another developer in the team can look at it and go, oh, cool, I didn't know you could do that as well. So we kind of like to share the knowledge a bit in here. And yeah, just kind of go through, is everything is going okay? Did you understand everything? Is the project manager, were the assignments clear? And just kind of like things, a checklist, make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. Is all your assignments listed here? In the correct status groups, which we saw earlier, they're in progress, on staging for review and stuff like that. and yeah, just kind of make sure everything is okay. And then once again, finally at the end, since it's the course of the retros, what were the things that kind of took longer, so we can go back and look at it and at least have a record of it, what it was. So next time around, it might go quicker.
Awesome. Yeah. So I mean that's essentially our workflow, and then and that's what helps us kind of stay on track. What I like about all these things too that we've done is we're not it's a non, and this is kind of what I talked about at .all 2023, was essentially it's a self-reporting system, right? So no one's ever having to wait. Like there's no points where like somebody's asking like, hey, how's this going, right? Because you're frequently sharing and updating, and it's visible. So like we don't have to ask, we just go and look, like how's this going, see where it is. So that's one of the things that I love about our system, and that allows you to then not have to have people hovering over you. You could just do work. Yeah. We can stay off your lawn, right?
Yeah.
And you could do your thing, but it gives us on the management side of things like the information that we need, and to communicate with clients, or to communicate internally, or to like if we need to shift, we can see where things are happening, and go from there. But even those 125% rule, like all that stuff, like is not so much that then you have to stop and do things. It's just a backstop to communicate. And so it's not even hard and fast rules of like you have to do this thing within 4 hours. Like you're the one setting those estimates, and you're the one then following those things. Like no one's put those demands on you in that sense, but it's more of the accountability piece of working small, which is what we like to do, because the bigger work you do, the easier it is to get lost in it. Kind of lose yourself in trying to do too much, because we like to complete things 100% before we move on to the next one. So anyways, phenomenal job, Michael. Thanks for giving the walkthrough of how we organize ourselves behind the scenes, but also just the progress on the SFS client build. So I'm looking forward to next week. We'll see kind of where you are and how much progress you've made on that that content component kind of feature card of all those different new tasks that you have in there.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody next week.